God brings me hope in my pain, in the Holy Spirit power. There are moments when the pain stops being something temporary and starts feeling like your permanent reality. Not loud, not dramatic, just constant, quiet, heavy. The kind of pain that follows you into the night and greets you again in the morning like it never left. And maybe no one around you fully sees it. You keep going, you keep functioning, you even smile when you have to, but inside something feels off, distant, like you are living your life, but not really feeling it anymore. And somewhere in that silence, a question begins to grow. Where is God in all of this? Because you did pray, you did believe, you tried to stay strong, but the answers did not come the way you expected. And now, instead of clarity, you are left with silence, not just around you, but within you. Let me tell you something most people will not say out loud. Faith becomes hardest, not when everything goes wrong, but when nothing seems to happen. Because when things collapse, at least you know something is happening. But when everything is still, when heaven feels quiet, when your prayers seem to disappear into the air, that is where your mind begins to create its own explanations. Maybe God is distant, maybe he is disappointed, maybe he is waiting, or maybe he is not there at all. But what if everything you are feeling right now is being misinterpreted? What if this silence is not rejection, but positioning? What if this pain is not proof that God left, but evidence that something deeper is being formed inside you? There is a kind of hope that does not arrive when life gets easier. It shows up when nothing changes, and yet something inside you refuses to give up. That is not weakness. That is not denial. That is the Holy Spirit, moving in a way you cannot yet recognize. And what you are about to understand will challenge the way you see your pain, your silence, and even your relationship with God. When pain becomes the only language you understand, there comes a moment when pain is no longer something you go through. It becomes something you live in. It is not just a situation anymore. It is the atmosphere of your thoughts. Everything starts to pass through it. Every memory, every expectation, every interpretation of what is happening around you. You wake up already tired, not because of what you did, but because of what you carry. Even the simplest things feel heavier than they should. Conversations lose depth. Joy feels distant. And you begin to notice that you are not reacting to life the way you used to. Something changed inside you. But the hardest part is not explaining it to others. It is understanding it yourself. Because this kind of pain does not always have a clear cause. It is not just one event, one loss, one moment. It is a build-up, a weight that formed over time until it became part of how you see everything. And slowly, without realizing it, pain becomes your reference point. You start reading life through it. Silence feels like abandonment. Waiting feels like rejection. Delay feels like punishment. And the more this pattern repeats, the more real it becomes. Until one day, it does not feel like a phase anymore. It feels like truth. But here is what you need to hear, even if it goes against everything you feel right now. Pain can be loud, but it is not always accurate. There is something deeper happening that your emotions cannot fully interpret. And if you allow pain to define reality, you will miss what is actually taking place beneath the surface. Because what comes next will confront something that feels even more real than pain: the silence of God. God's silence is not absence, it is strategy. You expected that if God was with you, you would feel it clearly. You believed that his presence would come with confirmation, that his voice would interrupt your confusion, that his answers would arrive with clarity strong enough to calm everything inside you. But instead, what you found was silence. Not a moment of pause, not a brief stillness, but a prolonged quiet that seems to stretch longer than you can explain. And the longer it stays, the more it begins to feel intentional, almost as if something is being withheld from you. That is where the struggle intensifies. Because silence creates space, and the human mind does not like empty space. It starts to interpret, it starts to question, it starts to build conclusions based on what it feels instead of what is real. You begin to wonder if you missed something, if you did something wrong, if there is a reason you are not hearing what you used to hear. And slowly, without realizing it, silence stops being neutral and starts feeling like rejection. But that interpretation is not truth. It is a reaction. God's silence is not the absence of His presence. It is the absence of noise. There are moments when God chooses not to speak because what He is forming inside you requires stillness. When everything is loud, you rely on signals, on confirmations, on emotional responses that tell you what to do next. But when everything becomes quiet, those external supports disappear. You are no longer guided by what you feel. You are drawn into something deeper, something that does not depend on constant reassurance, and that is where real faith begins to take shape. Faith is not built when everything makes sense. It is not formed when answers come quickly or when direction is obvious. Faith is built in the tension between what you expected and what you are experiencing. It grows in the space where clarity is missing, where movement is not visible, where the only thing you have left is the decision to trust without understanding. That is uncomfortable. It challenges your need for control. It forces you to release the illusion that you can manage outcomes or predict what comes next. And that release feels like loss at first, because you are letting go of certainty. But what you are actually gaining is something stronger. You are learning to remain when there is no feedback. You are learning to stand when there is no evidence. You are learning to believe when nothing around you confirms it. And this process does not happen in noise. It happens in silence. While you are waiting, God is not inactive. He is working in areas you cannot access. There are alignments happening that you cannot see yet. There are details being arranged that are not ready to be revealed. Timing is being prepared, not delayed. And if those things were shown to you too early, they would not make sense. You might act too soon or lose trust in the process because you cannot yet see the full picture. So the silence remains, not as punishment, not as distance, but as protection and preparation. It is protecting you from acting on incomplete understanding. It is preparing you for something that requires more stability than you currently have, because what is coming next in your life cannot be sustained by the version of you that depends on constant confirmation. It requires depth. It requires endurance. It requires a trust that does not collapse when answers are delayed. And that is exactly what this silence is building in you. The challenge is that while this process is happening, your emotions are still active. You still feel the weight. You still notice the absence of answers. And because you are still in the middle of it, it is difficult to recognize what is being formed. You only see what is missing. You only feel what is not happening. But silence is not empty. It is full of unseen activity. Every moment you remain, every time you choose not to give up, every time you hold on, even without understanding, something is being strengthened inside you. Something that will not depend on circumstances. Something that will not collapse when pressure increases. God is not distant from you in this silence. He is closer than you realize, working at a level that does not require your awareness to be effective. And as this silence continues, it leads you into a place where a new feeling begins to surface. Not just confusion, not just waiting, but something deeper, a question that becomes harder to ignore. The feeling that maybe you have been forgotten, the feeling of being forgotten by God. There is a moment in the journey of pain and silence where something shifts inside you. It is no longer just about what you are going through. It becomes about what you believe it means. And slowly, almost without noticing, a thought begins to form. Not loud, not immediate, but persistent. What if I have been forgotten? It is not a question you say out loud easily. It feels wrong to even think it. You still believe in God. You still want to trust Him. But there is a growing distance between what you believe and what you are experiencing. And that gap starts to create tension inside you. Because if God remembers you, why does it feel like nothing is moving? You look at your life, at the delays, at the unanswered prayers, at the same struggles repeating themselves. You remember the times you cried out, the moments you tried to stay strong, the effort you made to keep your faith alive. And yet, the situation remains. That is where the feeling deepens. You begin to compare, even if you do not want to. You see others moving forward, receiving breakthroughs, sharing testimonies. You hear stories of answered prayers, of doors opening, of sudden change. And without realizing it, something inside you starts asking, why not me? And that question is dangerous, not because it is wrong, but because of what it can lead you to believe. It can make you feel overlooked, invisible, like you are standing in a place where God is no longer paying attention. And when that feeling settles in, it starts affecting everything. Your prayers lose intensity. Your expectations begin to lower. Your hope becomes cautious, almost afraid to believe again. But listen carefully to this, because it goes against everything your emotions are telling you. God does not forget. Not your name, not your story, not your prayers, not the tears you never showed anyone. There is not a single moment of your pain that passed unnoticed. There is not a single cry that disappeared into nothing. What you are experiencing is not abandonment. It is timing that you do not control. There is a difference between being ignored and being prepared. When God is preparing something that goes deeper than surface-level change, it does not always look like progress. It can look like stillness. It can feel like delay. It can create the illusion that nothing is happening. But what is actually taking place is more precise than what you expected. Because if everything came when you wanted, it might not sustain you. If answers arrived before you were ready, they might not transform you. If doors opened too early, you might walk through them without the strength to remain there. So what feels like being forgotten is often a process of alignment. You are not being left behind, you are being positioned. But positioning requires patience. It requires you to stay when nothing confirms that staying makes sense. It requires you to trust when there is no visible reason to trust. And that is where the internal battle intensifies, because now it is not just about pain or silence. It is about what you choose to believe in the absence of both. And as this feeling continues to grow, it leads you into another layer of struggle, one that touches something very personal. What happens when you keep praying and it feels like your prayers are not going anywhere? When your prayers feel like they never go beyond the ceiling. There is a kind of frustration that does not come from pain itself, but from repetition without response. You pray once, believing. You pray again, holding on. You pray a third time, hoping something will shift. But then days pass, then weeks, and nothing changes. At first, you stay confident. You remind yourself to be patient. You tell yourself that God hears you. But as time goes on, something begins to wear down inside you. Not your desire to pray, but your expectation that something will actually happen. And that is where it starts to feel like your prayers are not going anywhere. You speak, but it feels like your words fall back on you. You ask, but there is no visible answer. You reach, but there is no sensation of being met. And the silence that follows each prayer becomes heavier than the words you spoke. It creates a tension that is hard to explain, because you still believe God can answer, but you are no longer sure if He will. And slowly, prayer begins to change. It becomes shorter, less intense, less frequent, not because you stopped caring, but because a part of you is trying to protect itself from disappointment. You start holding back, even with God. You say less than what you feel. You ask less than what you need. You lower your expectations so that if nothing happens, it hurts less. But in doing that, something deeper is being affected. Because prayer was never meant to be just about getting answers. It was meant to be connection. And when you start measuring prayer only by results, you begin to miss what is actually happening within it. Even when you feel nothing, something is taking place. Every time you pray, you are choosing to reach beyond what you feel. You are stepping out of what is visible and into something that cannot be measured in the moment. And that act, even without immediate response, is shaping something inside you. It is strengthening your persistence. It is deepening your dependence. It is teaching your spirit to remain, even when your emotions do not cooperate. The problem is that you are looking for external confirmation, while God is working internally. You want to see change around you. He is building stability within you. You want answers you can understand. He is forming a trust that goes beyond understanding. And because those two things are happening in different places, it feels like nothing is happening at all. But that is not true. There are prayers that are not answered immediately because they are connected to things that are still being prepared. Not just circumstances, but you, your capacity, your perspective, your ability to sustain what you are asking for. If everything you prayed for came right now, would you be ready to carry it? That question changes everything. Because sometimes the delay is not about denial, it is about development. And in this process, God is not ignoring your voice. He is aligning your life with what you are asking for, in a way that will not break you when it arrives. So even when it feels like your prayers are not passing the ceiling, they are not lost. They are being held. They are being processed. They are being answered, just not in the way you expected or in the time you demanded. And as this continues, it brings you to a deeper and more uncomfortable place. A moment where the struggle is no longer just about prayer or silence, but about what this entire process is doing to your own faith. The moment you begin to question your own faith, there is a point in this journey where the struggle stops being external and becomes deeply internal. It is no longer just about what is happening around you or what you are waiting for. It becomes about you, about what is changing inside you, about what you still believe and what you are no longer sure about. And that is where a new kind of tension appears. You start asking questions you never thought you would ask, not out of rebellion, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. You begin to wonder if your faith is as strong as you thought. If what you believed so confidently before still holds the same weight now, because it is easy to believe when things make sense. It is easy to trust when there are signs, when there is movement, when there is confirmation. But when everything becomes uncertain, when silence stretches longer than expected, when your prayers seem unanswered, something begins to shake, and that shaking feels uncomfortable. You do not want to doubt, you do not want to question, but the thoughts come anyway, quiet at first, almost unnoticeable, then stronger, more persistent, and suddenly you find yourself in a place where you are not just asking God questions. You are questioning your own ability to keep believing. Am I losing my faith? Why does this feel different now? Why is it harder to trust than it used to be? These questions do not mean you are failing. They mean something deeper is being exposed. Because faith that has never been tested remains surface level. It stays connected to emotions, to experiences, to visible results. But when those things are removed, when you are left without confirmation, your faith is no longer supported by what you feel. It is confronted by what you choose, and that is where the real transformation begins. You start to realize that faith is not just a feeling that comes and goes. It is not just confidence when everything aligns. Faith is a decision you make in the middle of uncertainty, a choice to remain even when clarity is absent, a commitment to trust even when your emotions are unstable. And that kind of faith feels different. It is quieter. It is less dependent on external validation. It does not need constant reassurance to exist. But before you reach that level, you have to face the discomfort of seeing your old understanding of faith fall apart. What you relied on before may no longer sustain you now, and that is not loss, that is growth. God is not trying to destroy your faith. He is refining it, removing what was shallow, strengthening what is real, building something that will not collapse under pressure, because what is ahead of you requires a deeper foundation than what you had before. So if you feel like your faith is being questioned, if you feel like something inside you is shifting, do not assume you are going backwards. You are being taken deeper. And as this process continues, something unexpected begins to happen. Because while you are focused on your doubts, there is a presence that has never left. A presence that does not depend on your certainty. A presence that is closer than you think. And what you're about to understand next will change the way you see where God actually moves. The Holy Spirit moves where you least expect. At this point, you have been focusing on what is missing. The answers you did not receive, the clarity that never came, the feelings that disappeared. But while your attention has been on what you cannot see, something has been happening in a place you were not looking, because the Holy Spirit does not move according to your expectations. You thought His presence would feel strong, undeniable, almost overwhelming. You expected something clear, something that would remove all doubt instantly. But His movement is often quieter than that, more subtle, less dramatic than you imagined, but more consistent than you realize. And that is why you missed it, not because it was not there, but because it did not look the way you expected. The Holy Spirit does not wait for perfect conditions to act. He does not require emotional stability, clarity, or even strong faith to begin moving. In fact, some of His most powerful work happens in the middle of confusion, weakness, and internal chaos. When everything feels out of place, He begins to align things within you. When your thoughts are scattered, He introduces a calm you cannot explain. When your strength feels gone, He sustains you in ways that do not make sense. But because these movements are not loud, you overlook them. You expect transformation to feel like a breakthrough, but sometimes it feels like a quiet shift. A thought that interrupts your anxiety, a moment of peace that comes without reason. A decision to keep going even when everything inside you wanted to stop. That is not coincidence. That is presence. The Holy Spirit is not distant, waiting for you to reach a certain level before He engages. He is already there, operating within your reality, not outside of it. He meets you in your current state, not in the version of you that you think you need to become first. And this changes everything, because it means you are not walking through this alone, even if it feels that way. It means that every moment you did not give up, every time you kept going without understanding why, every time you found just enough strength to move forward, it was not just you. Something was sustaining you. Someone was guiding you. And that guidance does not always come as instruction. Sometimes it comes as endurance. Sometimes it comes as restraint. Sometimes it comes as a quiet conviction that keeps you from making decisions that would have taken you in the wrong direction. You may not have recognized it in the moment, but there were times when you were about to fall apart, and something held you together. Not visibly, not dramatically, but effectively. That is how the Holy Spirit works. Not always by changing what is around you, but by stabilizing what is within you. And the more you begin to understand this, the more you start to notice something that was always there. Small signs, almost invisible, carrying meanings far greater than they appear. Because what comes next will make you realize that God has been responding, just not in the way you were expecting. Small signs that carry great answers. You have been waiting for something clear, something undeniable, a sign so obvious that it would remove every doubt at once. But because you were looking for something big, you overlooked what was already happening in front of you. God does not always respond in ways that match your expectations. Sometimes his answers come quietly, almost hidden within ordinary moments. And if you are only paying attention to what is loud, you will miss what is real. Think about the times when something inside you shifted, even slightly. A moment when your anxiety paused for no clear reason. A thought that came at the exact moment you needed it. A situation that could have gone wrong, but did not. A delay that frustrated you, but later protected you. At the time, it felt random. Now look again. Those were not empty moments. They were signals. The problem is not that God is not answering. The problem is that you have been trained to recognize only certain types of answers. Immediate change, visible results, clear direction. But God often speaks in ways that require attention, not just expectation. And that is where sensitivity begins to grow, because once you start noticing these small signs, something shifts inside you. You realize that God has not been silent. He has been communicating, just not in the volume you demanded. Every subtle redirection, every quiet protection, every unexpected calm carries intention. Nothing is random, nothing is wasted. Even the moments you dismissed as coincidence were part of something larger being formed. But here is where it becomes deeper. These small signs are not just about guidance, they are about relationship. Because when God chooses to speak in subtle ways, it draws you closer. It requires you to slow down, to pay attention, to become aware in a way that you were not before. It is no longer about receiving answers quickly. It becomes about recognizing his presence consistently, and that changes how you walk through your pain. You stop waiting only for outcomes and start noticing movement. You stop measuring only results and start discerning direction. You begin to realize that God has been involved in details you thought were insignificant. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it, because now you understand something most people miss. God does not need to be loud to be clear. And as your awareness grows, something unexpected begins to happen. The pain that once felt meaningless starts to reveal something hidden within it, something you could not see before, something that was never visible while you were focused only on escaping it. A pain that breaks you, but also reveals you. You spent so much time trying to escape the pain that you never stopped to ask what it was exposing. Because pain does not only hurt, it reveals. It strips away what was covering things you were not ready to see. It removes distractions, illusions, false strengths you thought were enough to sustain you. And that is why it feels so intense, because it is not just touching your situation. It is touching your identity. Before this, you had things that made you feel secure, control over certain areas, expectations about how life should unfold, a sense of direction that gave you confidence. But when pain entered, it did not just affect one part of your life. It started dismantling everything that was built on unstable ground, and that feels like loss. Because when something you depended on collapses, your first instinct is to rebuild it as fast as possible, to fix what broke, to return to what felt familiar. But what if what broke was never meant to hold you in the first place? Pain has a way of exposing what cannot sustain your future. It reveals where you placed your trust. It shows you what you depended on more than you realized, not to shame you, not to punish you, but to realign you. Because what is ahead of you requires something deeper than what you had before. And this is where the shift begins. You start to see that pain is not just removing things. It is uncovering truths. Truth about your limits. Truth about your fears. Truth about the parts of you that were strong on the outside, but fragile on the inside. And once those things are revealed, you cannot go back to who you were, because now you see clearly. You see where you were holding on too tightly. You see where you were relying on things that could not support you. You see where your identity was connected to outcomes instead of something unshakable. And even though this realization is uncomfortable, it is necessary, because God does not build on unstable foundations. He allows the breaking so that what remains can be real, so that what is rebuilt will not collapse again. And here is the part most people do not expect. In the middle of this breaking, you are not being destroyed. You are being uncovered. The version of you that depended on external stability is being replaced by something stronger, something that does not fall apart when circumstances shift, something that is rooted deeper than what you feel or what you see. But this process is not visible from the outside. No one sees it happening. No one understands the depth of what is changing within you, and sometimes not even you can fully recognize it, because what is taking place now is internal, invisible, quiet, but real. And that leads you into the next stage of this journey, where everything seems still on the outside, but something powerful is happening within. The invisible process happening within you. At this stage, it may feel like nothing is changing. The same environment, the same challenges, the same unanswered questions. From the outside, everything looks still. But what you cannot see is where the real transformation is taking place. Because God often works internally before he moves externally, and that can be frustrating. You want to see results. You want something tangible, something that proves that this process is leading somewhere. But instead, you are left with subtle shifts that are easy to overlook if you are only focused on visible change. Yet something is happening. Your reactions are not the same as before. Situations that once overwhelmed you now pause you. Thoughts that once controlled you now face resistance. You may not feel strong, but you are not as fragile as you used to be. And that is not random. That is formation. There is a restructuring happening within your mind, your emotions, your spirit. Patterns are being broken. Old ways of thinking are being challenged. Dependencies that once defined you are slowly losing their grip. But because this process is internal, it feels slow, almost invisible, like progress that cannot be measured. And that is where many people misunderstand what God is doing. They assume that if nothing is changing around them, then nothing is changing at all. But external change without internal preparation leads to instability. If everything shifted right now, without what is being built inside you, it would not last. So God starts within. He strengthens your capacity. He stabilizes your emotions. He deepens your understanding. He creates a version of you that can carry what is coming without collapsing under it. And this takes time, because real transformation is not immediate. It is layered. It is built through repetition, through pressure, through moments where you are forced to respond differently, even when you do not feel ready. And in those moments, something important is happening. You are no longer reacting automatically. You are becoming aware. You are beginning to choose differently. Even if those choices are small, even if they feel insignificant, they are part of something much bigger being formed inside you. Because what God is doing now is not just about solving your current situation. He is preparing you for a future where this version of you would not have been enough. So he slows the process down, not to frustrate you, but to solidify you. And even though you cannot fully see it yet, there is a shift taking place that will become visible in time. But before that visibility comes, there is another stage that feels even more confusing. A moment where you stop feeling almost everything and begin to question if anything is happening at all. When you feel nothing, but something is changing. There is a phase in this process that feels almost empty, not chaotic, not overwhelming, just numb. The intensity of the pain is no longer the same, but neither is the clarity you were hoping for. It is like standing in a place where nothing moves, nothing speaks, nothing reacts, and that can be just as unsettling as the pain itself. Because at least when you felt something, you knew you were engaged. You knew something was happening. But now, there is a quietness inside you that feels unfamiliar. Your emotions are not responding the way they used to. Your reactions are slower. Your thoughts are less intense. And instead of relief, this creates confusion. You start to wonder if you are losing something, if your connection with God is fading, if this numbness means distance. But what if this is not loss? What if this is stabilization? When everything inside you was loud, it was hard to discern anything clearly. Emotions were driving your perception. Reactions were immediate. Everything felt urgent, overwhelming, intense. But now, something has shifted. The noise has decreased, and in that quiet, something new is being formed. You are no longer being controlled by every feeling that passes through you. You are no longer reacting from impulse. There is space now, space to observe, to process, to respond differently. And even though it feels unfamiliar, it is necessary, because growth is not always emotional. Sometimes it is structural. God is not removing your ability to feel. He is teaching you not to depend on feelings, to define what is real. Because if your connection with Him depends only on what you feel, then every emotional fluctuation will affect your faith. So He allows this phase, a phase where you do not feel what you expected, where your emotions are quieter, where your internal responses are changing, not to disconnect from you, but to ground you. Because what He is building now is not based on emotional intensity, it is based on stability. A stability that does not collapse when you feel weak. A connection that does not disappear when you feel nothing. A faith that remains even when your emotions are silent. And here is the part that is difficult to recognize in the moment. Even in this numbness, something is moving. Your endurance is increasing. Your reactions are being refined. Your internal structure is becoming stronger. You may not feel progress, but you are not where you were before. Something has shifted, and that shift will become clearer as you move forward, because what comes next will challenge one of the most common misunderstandings about God's presence. The idea that if you do not feel Him, He is not there. God's presence does not depend on your feelings. One of the deepest misunderstandings you can carry in your journey with God is the belief that His presence must be felt to be real. That if you do not sense Him, if you do not feel peace, warmth, or clarity, then somehow He is not there. And without realizing it, you begin to measure God by your emotions. If you feel strong, you believe He is close. If you feel empty, you assume He is distant. But that pattern will always leave you unstable. Because your emotions change constantly. They rise and fall depending on circumstances, thoughts, memories, even physical exhaustion. And if your perception of God is tied to something that unstable, then your faith will always feel uncertain. That is why this phase matters so much, because God is breaking that dependency. He is teaching you to recognize His presence beyond what you feel, not because your feelings are wrong, but because they are incomplete. There will be moments when you feel nothing, and yet He is fully present. Moments when you feel weak, and yet He is sustaining you. Moments when you feel alone, and yet you are being guided with precision. And if you only trust what you feel, you will misinterpret every one of those moments. You will think He left when He is actually closer. You will think nothing is happening when everything is being aligned. You will think you are disconnected when you are being held. That is why this shift is necessary. Because God is not trying to give you a temporary experience. He is building a relationship that does not collapse when emotions fade. A connection that is anchored in truth, not sensation. And this is where your faith becomes something different. It becomes quieter, but stronger, less reactive, but more stable, less dependent on confirmation, but more rooted in trust. You start to realize that His presence is not proven by what you feel, but by what remains. The fact that you are still here, the fact that you did not give up, the fact that even without feeling Him, you did not walk away. That is not coincidence. That is evidence, because if He was not present, you would not have made it this far. And once you begin to understand this, something shifts inside you. You stop chasing feelings and start recognizing truth. You stop depending on emotional highs and start valuing consistency. You stop asking, "Do I feel God?" and start seeing where He has been all along. And that awareness opens your eyes to something you did not expect, because hope does not come from everything changing. Sometimes it is born in the most unlikely place. Hope that is born in the most unlikely place. You expected hope to come when things improved, when answers arrived, when doors opened, when pain finally started to fade. You thought hope would be the result of change, something that would naturally appear once your situation made sense again. But that is not how it is happening. Instead, hope is starting to show up in the middle of everything staying the same. And that does not seem logical. Nothing around you has fully shifted yet. The questions are still there. Some of the weight is still present. The process is still unfolding. And yet, something inside you is not as heavy as it used to be. There is a quiet resistance growing, a refusal to completely give up. Not loud, not emotional, not dramatic, but real. And that is where hope is being formed. Not from external change, but from internal transformation. Because real hope is not dependent on circumstances aligning. It is built when everything remains uncertain, and you still choose not to collapse. It is born when your situation gives you every reason to stop believing, and something inside you refuses to agree with that conclusion, that something is not coming from you alone. It is being sustained. You are being held in a way that does not always feel visible, but is undeniably present. And this changes how hope operates in your life. It is no longer fragile. It does not disappear when things go wrong. It does not depend on quick answers. It becomes steady, rooted, unshaken by what is happening around you, because now hope is no longer based on what might happen. It is based on who is with you while it is happening. And that is a different kind of strength. You begin to notice that even in moments where you expected to break, you did not. Even when your thoughts tried to pull you down, something kept you from going all the way. Even when you felt like stopping, you kept moving, even if slowly. That is hope working within you, not as a feeling, but as a force. And the more you recognize it, the more it grows, because what you acknowledge strengthens. You start to see that hope is not something you need to wait for. It is something that is already being developed inside you. And once that becomes clear, another realization begins to surface. Because if you have made it this far, if you are still standing, still moving, still holding on in ways you did not think you could, then there is a strength in you that you have not fully recognized yet, a strength that was not there before, a strength that is not coming from your own ability. And what you are about to understand next will reveal where that strength is actually coming from, the strength you did not know you had. If someone had asked you before all of this began how much you could handle, you probably would have given an answer based on what you knew about yourself at the time. You would have measured your strength by past experiences, by what you had already faced, by what you believed were your limits. But now, those limits no longer look the same. Because you have endured things you never thought you could carry. You have faced moments that should have broken you. You have walked through days where continuing felt harder than stopping. And yet, you are still here. Not the same, not unchanged, but still standing. And that forces a question you may not have considered before. Where did that strength come from? Because it does not fully match what you thought you were capable of. There were moments when you felt empty, when you believed you had nothing left to give, when your energy, your clarity, your motivation seemed completely gone. And still, something in you continued. You kept going when it did not make sense. You held on when there was no clear reason to hold on. You moved forward, even if slowly, even if uncertain. That is not normal endurance. That is sustained strength. And that strength is not coming from your own ability alone. The Holy Spirit does not always show his presence through dramatic experiences. Sometimes he reveals himself through quiet endurance, through the ability to keep going when everything inside you says stop, through a stability that does not match your emotional state. Because if it depended only on how you felt, you would have stopped already. But you did not. And that is evidence. Evidence that something beyond your natural capacity is sustaining you. You may not feel strong, but you are not as weak as you think. You may not feel confident, but you have not collapsed. You may not feel certain, but you have not walked away. That contradiction reveals something important. Your strength is no longer based on your emotions. It is being supported by something deeper, something consistent, something that does not fluctuate the way your feelings do. And as this strength develops, it begins to change how you see yourself. You are no longer defined by how easily you can be shaken. You are becoming someone who can remain, someone who can endure without immediate answers, someone who does not fall apart every time circumstances shift. And that transformation is not accidental. It is intentional, because what is ahead of you requires more than temporary strength. It requires stability. It requires endurance. It requires a version of you that does not depend on perfect conditions to remain standing. And that is exactly what is being built inside you right now, even if you do not fully recognize it yet. But as this strength becomes clearer, something else begins to take shape. Because this process was never just about surviving what you are going through. It is about becoming someone new through it. And what you are about to see next will connect everything you have experienced so far. The transformation your pain is producing without you realizing. Up to this point, you have been focused on getting through the pain, surviving the silence, holding on through the uncertainty. But now, something deeper begins to surface. This was never just about enduring. It was about becoming. Because while you were trying to manage what you felt, something was being reshaped within you. Not instantly, not visibly, but consistently, layer by layer, moment by moment, through everything you thought was only resistance. You thought you were stuck. You were being transformed. There are parts of you that no longer react the same way. Thoughts that used to control you now lose strength faster. Situations that once overwhelmed you now meet a different response. Even if subtle, even if incomplete, something has changed. And that change did not come from external solutions. It came from internal formation. Pain has a way of accelerating what comfort delays. It forces confrontation. It removes illusions. It exposes patterns that would have remained hidden if everything stayed easy. And in that exposure, transformation begins. Not the kind that announces itself, the kind that builds quietly. You are not the same person who entered this process. Even if your environment has not fully shifted yet, your internal structure has. Your perception is different. Your reactions are more measured. Your awareness is deeper. And most importantly, your foundation is stronger. Before, you needed things to go right to feel stable. Now you are learning to remain even when they do not. That is transformation, not perfection, not completion, but progression. And the reason you do not fully recognize it is because you are still inside the process. You are living it in real time. You are too close to it to see the full picture. But if you pause for a moment and look back even slightly, you will notice it. You are still here, still thinking, still processing, still choosing not to give up. That alone speaks of change, because there were moments when the old version of you would not have handled this the same way. And that is the evidence. You are not just surviving your pain, you are being reshaped by it, prepared for something that requires more than who you were before. Because what is coming next in your life will not be sustained by the person you used to be. It requires this version, the one being built right now, even if unfinished, even if still in process. And as everything begins to align, as this transformation continues to settle, one final realization begins to rise above all the others. A truth that changes how you see everything you went through. Because when you look back with clarity, you will understand something that right now still feels hidden. You were never alone. Not for a single moment. You were never alone. God was in every detail. Now you begin to see what you could not see before. Not because everything is suddenly perfect, but because your perspective has changed. The same moments that once felt empty now start to reveal something deeper. The same silence that once felt like distance now carries meaning. You look back, and something becomes undeniable. You made it through things you did not think you would survive. You held on in moments where letting go would have been easier. You were sustained in ways that did not make sense at the time. And when you connect those moments, a truth begins to form. You were never alone. Not in your lowest point. Not in your confusion. Not in the nights where no one else knew what you were carrying. God was there. Not always in the way you expected. Not always in a way you could feel, but present in every detail, in the strength you did not know you had, in the decisions you almost made, but did not, in the timing that frustrated you, but protected you, in the silence that shaped you instead of breaking you. Nothing you went through was empty, nothing was ignored, nothing was wasted. Even the parts that hurt the most were being used to form something that could not be built any other way. And now, standing where you are, you begin to understand something that changes everything. God was not late. God was not distant. God was not absent. He was precise, working in ways that required time, building in areas that needed depth, preparing something that could not be rushed. And even when you questioned, even when you doubted, even when you felt like you were losing your faith, He remained unshaken, unmoved, committed to completing what He started in you. So now the question is no longer where was God? The question becomes, will you trust what He has been doing all along? Because if He carried you through everything you did not understand, if He sustained you when you felt like giving up, if He remained present even when you could not feel Him, then what is ahead of you is not something to fear. It is something to step into, with a different kind of faith, a faith that has been tested, refined, strengthened, a faith that no longer depends on perfect conditions, but is anchored in something deeper. And from this point forward, you do not move the same way, because now you know. Even in silence, even in pain, even in uncertainty, God is there, and He always has been.